The taste of copper flooded my mouth as my father's words hit me across the dinner table. You and your kid are nothing but leeches sucking this family dry. My mother's satisfied smile stretched wider, like she'd been rehearsing this moment in mirrors for months. The irony burned through my chest. They were eating my food, sitting in chairs I'd bought, under a roof I'd been paying for since they moved in. I didn't drop my fork, I didn't gasp. I set it down with surgical precision and met his glare. You have 24 hours to leave. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the refrigerator humming in the next room. My name is Sarah. I'm 34, and I'm a software engineer. This is the story of how I finally made my family pay their own way. What they didn't know was that I'd been documenting everything for months. Every late payment I'd covered, every lie they'd told, every manipulation they'd used to keep me writing checks. That dinner wasn't an explosion. It was an execution. 3 hours earlier, I'd been sitting in my car outside Westfield Elementary, watching my son Marcus walk out with his backpack dragging behind him. He climbed into the passenger seat and immediately pulled out his phone, scrolling through messages. At 12, he was already learning to navigate the minefield of family politics that had shaped my entire childhood. "Mom," he said without looking up, "Grandpa called me today. He said you were being mean to them about money." My hands tightened on the steering wheel. That was the line they'd finally crossed, dragging my child into their financial manipulation. I'd spent years being the family ATM, the reliable daughter who never said no, the one who quietly absorbed every crisis they created. But weaponizing my son's innocence? That triggered something cold and final in my chest. The backstory isn't complicated. My parents had raised me with one unshakable rule. Family comes first. Even when family meant my brother Derek's failed restaurant, their underwater mortgage, and medical bills they'd somehow never managed to budget for despite both having steady jobs their entire lives. I'd been their safety net since I landed my first tech job at 22, and they'd grown comfortable, assuming I always would be. 6 months ago, they'd moved into my house temporarily after Derek's latest business collapsed. Temporary became permanent when they stopped looking for their own place and started treating my home like their personal retirement resort. My father would sit by my pool, drinking beer and complaining about my neighbors. My mother rearranged my kitchen without asking, then criticized my parenting style during dinner. But the real betrayal was quieter, more systematic. I'd been finding evidence everywhere. My credit cards used for purchases I hadn't made, utilities in my name for properties I didn't own, even a car loan they'd somehow attached to my credit score. They weren't just living in my house, they were living off my identity. My background in data analysis made it easy to track their digital trail once I started paying attention. The night before that final dinner, I'd called my lawyer, Janet. Her voice was steady as she walked me through the documentation I'd need. "Financial abuse is still abuse, Sarah. And in Texas, you have options." The next evening, I prepared for what I knew would be our last family dinner. The confrontation started innocently enough. I'd set the table for 4, made Derek's favorite lasagna, even bought the wine my mother preferred. Marcus was upstairs finishing homework, safely removed from what I knew would come next. "We need to talk about the arrangement," I said, placing a folder next to my father's plate. "About boundaries, expectations, and timelines." My mother's smile faltered. "Arrangement? Sweetheart, we're family." "Family that's been using my credit cards without permission," I replied, opening the folder. "Family that forged my signature on a car loan. Family that owes me $47,000 in documented expenses." Derek shifted uncomfortably. He'd been staying suspiciously quiet, his usual bravado replaced by something that looked almost like guilt. My father's face darkened. "You're keeping tabs on your own parents? What kind of daughter?" "The kind who pays attention," I cut him off. "The kind who notices when her identity gets stolen by the people supposed to protect her." That's when he exploded. The venom, the accusations, the claim that Marcus and I were leeches. The stunning projection of a man who'd spent months bleeding my bank account dry while calling me selfish for asking questions. My mother's mask slipped entirely. "You think you're so smart with your computer job and your fancy house. You think you're better than us." Her voice carried decades of resentment I'd never seen coming. "Well, you're nothing without family. Nothing." Derek finally spoke, his voice quiet but cutting. Maybe she should be nothing then. Maybe we should tell everyone what she's really like. The threat was clear. They'd weaponize my reputation, my relationships, probably even my job if I didn't continue funding their lifestyle. It was extortion wrapped in family loyalty, and they weren't even trying to hide it anymore. That's when my training kicked in. Years of debugging complex systems had taught me to think in logical sequences, to identify problems and eliminate them systematically. This was just another system failure that needed correction. 24 hours, I repeated, standing up. Janet will be here tomorrow with the eviction papers if you're not gone voluntarily. My mother laughed, but it sounded hollow. You can't evict family. Watch me. The next morning, I took Marcus to school early, then returned home to find my parents frantically packing. Derek was screaming into his phone, probably trying to find somewhere else to land. My mother sat on the couch staring at nothing, like she couldn't process that her reliable daughter had finally learned to say no. My father tried one last manipulation. Your grandfather would be ashamed of you, throwing out your own blood. I handed him a printout, my grandfather's will, with the specific clause about never lending money to Derek or enabling his get-rich-quick schemes. I'd retrieved it from my safety deposit box that morning, knowing they'd try this exact guilt trip. My grandfather had seen this coming 20 years ago. He already was ashamed, I said, just not of me. By noon, they were gone. Derek had managed to find a friend's couch to crash on temporarily. My parents moved into a small apartment across town that Derek's friend helped them secure. The house felt different, immediately, quieter but not empty, clean, like the air itself had been purified. That afternoon, Marcus came home from school to find me sitting by the pool, laptop open, working in the silence I'd forgotten I loved. He dropped his backpack and sat beside me. "They're gone," he said. Not a question. "They're gone," I confirmed. He nodded slowly. "Good. They made you sad all the time." Children see what adults try to hide. He'd been watching me shrink under their demands, absorb their criticism, sacrifice my peace for their comfort. In protecting him from their toxicity, I'd shown him exactly what it looked like. The aftermath was swift and predictable. Derek started a whisper campaign among distant relatives, painting me as the cold-hearted daughter who'd abandoned her parents. Most of our relatives saw through his manipulation, especially when they learned about the financial fraud. The few who believed his version weren't people whose opinions mattered to me anymore. My mother played the victim on social media, posting manipulative messages about ungrateful children and family loyalty. My father went silent, probably calculating his next move. But something had shifted in me. Their approval wasn't currency anymore. Their opinion couldn't hurt me because I'd finally seen them clearly, not as family, but as people who happened to share my DNA and nothing else. 3 weeks later, Janet called with an update. The financial investigation had uncovered even more: unauthorized accounts, fraudulent applications, a paper trail of theft that totaled nearly $73,000 and went back years. The district attorney was interested. I could have pressed charges, should have, probably. But I made a different choice. I sent them one final message: repay what you stole, stay out of my life, and we'll call it even. Otherwise, Janet sends everything to the DA. They chose repayment, monthly installments of $800 that will take them 7.5 years to complete. But it's happening. Derek had to sell his car and move back in with our parents to help cover the payments. My mother had to get a part-time job at a local grocery store. My father had to swallow his pride and ask his brother for help with their first month's rent. After 6 months of consistent payments, I know they're committed to seeing this through rather than facing criminal charges. Marcus and I started new traditions: Saturday morning pancakes without walking on eggshells, movie nights where no one criticized my choices or demanded money during commercial breaks, family dinners that felt like celebrations instead of hostage negotiations. 6 months later, we planted a garden together. Marcus wanted vegetables. I wanted flowers. We compromised with both, creating something beautiful that belonged entirely to us. As we worked in the soil, our hands dirty and our hearts light, he looked up at me. "Do you miss them?" I considered the question seriously. Did I miss the constant anxiety, the financial drain, the walking on eggshells and second-guessing every decision, or did I miss the idea of family I'd been taught to want? I miss who I thought they were, I told him honestly, but I love who we are without them. He smiled and went back to planting tomatoes, humming slightly off-key. In that moment, I realized something profound. Family isn't about blood. It's about who protects your peace, celebrates your success, and loves you without conditions or invoices. My parents taught me one valuable lesson, though they never intended it. They showed me exactly what kind of family I didn't want to be. And in finally saying no to them, I said yes to the mother I wanted Marcus to remember. The house is ours now. The silence is ours. The future is ours. And sometimes, when people ask how I could do that to family, I tell them the truth. I didn't do it to family. I did it for family. For the family that Marcus and I are building together, one boundary at a time. If you're reading this and recognizing yourself in my story, if you're the one everyone calls when bills come due, if your love is measured in dollars, if your family's emergencies have become your chronic stress, know this: you are not responsible for fixing people who broke themselves. You are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep others warm, even if they raised you to believe otherwise. The hardest word to learn is no. But once you master it, it becomes the foundation of every authentic relationship you'll ever build. Because the people who truly love you will never ask you to sacrifice your well-being for their comfort. That's what I wish someone had told me 20 years ago. That's what I want Marcus to know now. And that's why I'm sharing this story. Because somewhere out there, someone else is sitting at their own dinner table, watching their own family treat their kindness like weakness. You don't have to keep the peace at the cost of your peace. You don't owe anyone your suffering, not even the people who share your last name. Before you go, here's a quick bonus for sticking around. If you love learning and growing like I do, you need to try audiobooks. I've got an exclusive deal with Audible. Your first month is completely free. That's access to over 500,000 titles, zero cost to you. All the details are waiting in the description. Don't miss this one.